let's start with this message. Zappos, we will not have an unhappy customer through the world's best customer service. What are they selling?
Customer service.
Ah, pretty easy, huh? But if you think about this, at the time that Zappos created this message in 2004, they were almost bankrupt. And they had almost gone bankrupt twice before that. Because selling shoes on the internet, in my opinion, is not a very smart idea. And so when they started Zappos, it was like, we're going to get people, especially women, to buy shoes on the internet, even though they can't try them on first. That makes no sense to me at all. So, like I say, they almost went into bankruptcy twice. They were saved twice by investors because the dot-com craze was still huge in the late 90s and everybody wanted to get involved somehow. The last time they almost went out of business, Tony Hsieh invested in them. And Tony was a little bit smarter, I think, than some of the other investors. He says, if I'm putting my money in there, I'm going to make sure it works. So we went in and we started looking at, I was fortunate enough to be part of the consulting team that he brought in, and we started looking at, what's wrong with this picture? Why aren't people buying shoes on the internet? It was because when they'd get them, they didn't fit, or they didn't get the right size, or they didn't get the right one that they thought they were getting. Because the problem with Zappos at that time was they were an intermediary. They had an internet site where you could go order your shoes, and then they were drop shipped by the manufacturer to you. And a lot of times the manufacturer didn't get it right. The order might have come into Zappos correctly, but it didn't get to the manufacturer correctly. So what did Tony decide to do? He says, we're going to change our why statement. We're going to change why we're in business. We're no longer in business to sell shoes. We're in business to make sure that we deliver the world's best customer service and have the happiest customers in the world. Just happened to be that shoes was still the product. So what they did is they said, we're closing up our operations in San Francisco and we're moving to Las Vegas. Big gambling town. So if we're going to take another gamble, let's do it from the best gambling town in the country. But they were able to pick up a very large warehouse at a very cheap cost, and they invited all these manufacturers down to an event. And they said, we're going to have the best customer service in the world, and we're going to make our customers very happy. We want you, Mr. Manufacturer, to bring all your shoes to our warehouse and let us distribute them to you. And oh, by the way, we have no money. But they got enough people to believe in their mission and their why statement on what they were going to do, and they sold those manufacturers on being able to deliver shoes to that warehouse, because how could you have a happy customer if you weren't in control of distribution? And if you weren't in control of what was being delivered to that customer. So I don't know if everybody knows the rest of the story, but 4 years later, Amazon bought them for $840 million. I mean, pretty good return from going from almost bankrupt to selling off for a huge return. And today, if any of you ever go out to Las Vegas, don't go to the casinos without going to Zappos first, because they love having visitors, and it is the happiest place you'll ever be. The first thing that they did is they hired Jen Lin, who became their chief happiness officer, and she made sure everybody in that company was happy. If there was a complaint, we want to hear it here first, because if the people that worked there weren't happy, the customer could never be happy. So again, just a quick lesson in one type of selling. Here's another type of selling. We build bridges between systems and love. What kind of company is that? Minneapolis-based company. About 4 years ago, had an opportunity to work with this company, and they were trying to sell a smartphone application that allowed you to control your environment, the temperatures, your lights, everything inside your own environment. They weren't finding anybody to buy, because they were going into consumers and saying, We can do this, 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 and this. And the consumers will go, I don't care. So we had to figure out a way to get somebody else to buy it because this small 18-person company didn't have a relationship with the consumers anyway. So we came up with their why statement of building bridges between systems and love. And because the CEO of that company was going to be speaking at a large utility energy conference, happened to be in Las Vegas. I told him to go to Zappos, and he did. But when he got up on stage, he says, my name is Mark, and I build bridges between systems and love. And we anticipated what the audience was going to do. We got, 1,000-some people out in that audience from the energy world. And he goes, yeah, really, love. That's what I do. Because I love my family. And I love my wife. I love my kids. I love my employees. My employee loves their wife, their family, their kids. And if we love them, we want to make sure that the environment in which they live in is perfect. We happen to have an app to do that. And we think all you utility companies out there should be licensing that from us so that you can deliver it to your customers tomorrow. We want you to have love with your relationships with your customers as well. Because in the world, isn't this the truth? That's it. I mean, love does it all. I mean, if you can deliver love, you can sell anything. Mark had people lining up after his keynote to talk to him about it. So, again, changing the messaging in a lot of ways can help you sell how you present. Okay, I'm done. That's it. No, I'm gonna change something here because again, my apologies for not being a little smoother, but it wasn't until just a few minutes ago that I even knew I was going to be doing this. Okay, so National Sales and Marketing Conference, Thrive. The person who was giving this presentation to their sales team was trying to, you know what, I screwed up. I do make some mistakes all the time, so we're going to, but I learned from them. I'm going to pull up the right one this time. Okay. Kemper Insurance. VP of Sales, giving at an event conference for all their salespeople, trying to motivate them to sell better. Pretty boring. Pretty boring. Next slide. Here's our agenda today. Update our progress. Sales and marketing alignment. Meeting objectives. Somebody's asleep yet. Here we go. A new appointment. New initiative. We're going to try to do this year. Da-da-da-da. You guys enthusiastic? You going to get out and help sell more insurance? Blah, blah, blah. You get it. That was the presentation that this particular VP was going to give. Have a great meeting. Blah. I don't care what you added as color to those slides. People are going to be bored to death. So, happened to be a friend of Chris's and mine. Chris and I worked on this together to help her have a better presentation. And guess what? Where's the one I just lost? You guys are looking at, you get to look at me go through all these, whoop, I got to get back on Keynote. Again, I apologize for not being a little bit smoother. Okay. Wrong one. Okay, there we go. So we came up with a statement for her. Now, this was their first slide. Thrive, National Sales Marketing Conference. We want all of you guys to thrive out there. The reason we brought you together is so that you can make more money. Because we want you to go out and help all those independent agents in your market make more money. That's what we're all about here today. How are we going to do that this year? Well, let's look at where we've been for the last couple of years. It's been a pretty tough road out there. Ever since the 2008 crash, our sales have been going down. And it's not just us. It's the way the world has been operating. But now we're coming back. Look at what's happened in the last couple of years, in the last couple of months here at Kemper. We've been breaking the mold. We've been out there creating passion for our customers. We're changing our messaging. What's that led to? Optimism in our agents. All those independent agents are getting more optimistic about what's going to happen in the next few months. Now let's tell them why Kemper is going to be the best way to make them even more optimistic. Believe in yourselves. Get your agents to believe in themselves. We've had success. Let's keep it going. It's been the key to what's happened in the last few months. Our sales are way up. Our customers are trusting us more. Be excited. Let's get people to believe in what we are doing. Now, which one of those messages would have got your sales team more rallied? This one, we believe, it did work for them. They've had record sales ever since that sales rally. So that's not how good you are. It's how good you want to be. This is part of the messaging that she was delivering. So finally, let's remember these 4 things as we leave our sales conference. We are what we respect, do excellence. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit. Some of you have heard me do this presentation before, but you probably haven't heard it done 30 times, so it hasn't become a habit with you yet. But it's true. You want to do excellence all the time. Always take time to reward the small things. We have many people in this room today that we're going to give rewards to at this sales meeting because you've done such a good job. We're going to give you incentive to go do that with your independent sales agents. And never be afraid to try anything. There's nothing inside Kemper today that we won't allow you to do to help your sales agents get more sales. Just come to us and we'll help you get it worked out. And remember, before thank you, that things may come to those who wait, but only the things that are left behind by those who hustle. So get out there, you guys. Hustle. Get out there today. You're going to be rewarded for it, and so are the agencies you're working with. Now, again, I think that message is much better than the kind of message that she started out with all those graphics and everything else. So when you guys are going out to look for customers, make sure that your message isn't full of a bunch of bullet points and a bunch of numbers and all that kind of. They could care less. They want to know the value to them and the value on how you're going to deliver that value to them. So I've got another example here, I hope, of a guy that was trying to raise money for a new startup company. Well, somehow it got lost in the transition. But we don't need that. Got lost in transition. But basically what happened was this company had a new way of developing what's known as fiber rebar. Anybody know what that is? Fiber rebar? Yeah. I mean, if you think about building buildings, how safe is it that we're in this building today? It's steel inside of cement. What does steel and water and salt do? It oxidizes. That's why you see all the corrosion and rust that you see on buildings all the time and why they have to rebuild bridges. They're putting elements together that shouldn't be together. So what they have created is a means of being able to use fiber, basically agricultural throwaway, and mix it with the right kind of resin to create a new rebar that goes inside cement that works just like steel, except it's 10 times stronger. and it doesn't corrode, doesn't hurt. So Eric, the guy who started that company, they're up in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, he was at CleanTech this year. I don't know if anybody was at CleanTech here in the Twin Cities, but he was presenting at CleanTech, and he got up there and he had a slide that says, I'm Eric, we're building this new rebar, and for the next 4 slides, I was one of the judges, and I think by the 3rd slide I was sleeping because it was so boring. He's an engineer. So after that meeting, we got together with him, we said, let's change the message a little bit. We used 3 slides. The first slide was a picture of the 35W bridge collapse, right? And that's all it was. And so then Eric got up and said, here's today's world. This is what's happening all around us. People are getting hurt because people are mixing steel and cement. The next picture was a picture of the Parthenon. This building is 3,000 plus years old. You know how it was built? With fiber rebar. It was basically, if you think about it, straw, wood, all this stuff mixed with the same thing as we have with cement today. And the Parthenon is still standing. Now, how do you want your buildings in the future to be? 35W or the Parthenon? That was his message. He won CleanTech because he ended up he was able to go out to San Francisco, and he's actually got all the money that he needed with those 3 slides. I mean, simple little message, right? It's how you present it, not all those damn numbers. Most of the investors that we've been working with in the last few years don't care about the numbers. They care about you, the people they're going to invest in, your passion, and if there's a marketplace for what you're trying to sell. So the best thing to do is be able to prove yourself and prove the marketplace. We have I know one of the things that Chris was going to talk about today is a client that we're working with right now, a company called StoryWorks, another company here in the Twin Cities, that has built a platform for allowing technology and collateral and other types of information to be presented during a sales pitch on demand. Because what we're seeing happening in most sales pitches today is the technology, the PowerPoints, the keynotes, whatever you're using to go sell is getting in the way of the personal connection. So working with StoryWorks, we've created a new, kind of their new why is that they ignite genuine connections. They bring back people to people because people don't buy from technology, they buy from people. They buy from the fact that they trust you. So in StoryWorks' case, Jeff is doing a keynote presentation at the National Chief Learning Officers Conference in Tampa at the end of this month. So he wanted to deliver the message that StoryWorks is a technology that is not there to hinder a sale, but it's there to be the platform to deliver affirmation of what you're talking about during a sale. So it becomes a tool to enhance the sale process rather than get in the way of it. So we had to try to figure out a way to try to do this in a new way for Jeff. And he was willing to take a chance. So basically his sales presentation at this new conference, he's going to start out with a PowerPoint and a bunch of cards in his hand. And he's going to get up there just like Sharon was going to with Kemper and go, yeah, hi, my name is Jeff, and let's see here. We're going to be talking about the importance of genuine connections. And then we got all kinds of problems that are going to start happening with the technology, right? So the next step in this presentation is that he's going to call somebody up out of the audience because Jeff happened to be a professional ballroom dancer at one point in his career. And he's going to bring up a volunteer from the audience, and he's going to, in fact, come on up here. You look like, I don't know if I can hold the mic and do this at the same time. But, okay, give me your hand. Give me your other hand. I know I got the mic in the way, but. So, now follow my hands. So if I follow my hands and I'll push back on him, And as you push back and I move, follow what I do, right? Okay, so you get the point. The reason that works is we have a connection. We're looking at each other. We're able to connect. And you've probably got a little bit of trust because at least I didn't push too hard on your hands, right?
Trust you, yeah.
All right, thank you. So this will be a part of the principle then of talking about when you start really connecting with somebody, they'll respond to you. You give a little bit, they push back. You give a little bit, you push back. So it's the same concept with his technology. When you start talking to somebody, making that connection during the sales call, and now they say, well, what about this? Can you prove your point? His platform, the StoryWorks platform, will allow you to have things. I mean, unfortunately, I don't have it with me. This was Chris's part. Chris, watch this video. We're missing you. Anyway, so at that point, you could bring up the right material to affirm what you were talking about. So then the next step in this process is there's an animated character that comes on the screen that Jeff starts acting with. The point of all this is that when you're delivering something new and you're trying to get your point across, think a little bit outside the box. Try to figure out a why statement that allows you to get an emotional connection with your person right away. So in Jeff's case, when he's up on stage or when he goes on a sales call now, he goes, I'm Jeff Fritz. I'm here to ignite a genuine connection. And what do you think the next thing is that happens? Okay. You connect because that person probably says, how are you going to do that? Tell me more. And immediately opens up a trust factor between you and the person you're talking to. And if you create that little bit of trust, you now have permission to give them your benefits and features and all that kind of stuff. If you start out that way, it's like, you're trying to push something off on me again because I didn't give you permission to tell me. That's kind of like even like, I like to use the example. Let's say you're going to a funeral. Probably not the most happy example, but it works. So let's say you're going to a funeral and Jim's dad unfortunately passed away unexpectedly, right? So, Jim, I'm so sorry to hear about your dad. When my dad died, well, what happened there? I gave him a little bit of connection, but I immediately took it away. I went right back to when my dad died. If I walked up to Jim and go, Jim, I'm so sorry to hear about your dad. Can you please tell me a little story about him that really makes you feel good? That one little difference there keeps it at Jim and allows him to be controlling the conversation, or at least thinking he's controlling the conversation. But it makes him feel good. And once you have that trust, it's amazing how well and easy it is to get people to do what you want them to do in a good way. And not that you're trying to manipulate or control them, but in the selling process, they're going to buy from you more if they trust you, especially in a cold call or in a new time. So part of what we were trying to do with Jeff Fritz and with this demonstration that was going to go on today is you'd be able to see a little bit of that whole thing that we're doing with him. But unfortunately, I don't have that with me. So I'm going to open it up for questions because I think the best way to learn from these kind of sessions, especially when we have a nice small group like this, is to interact, to exchange ideas. So based on some of the things that you've heard from me, and does this make sense? Do you have questions about it? Have you got any kind of stories that you can tell about how this either didn't work or worked for you? Mr. Superman.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And it's a question just to learn what you just said about that Iran. So steel, what was the machine? You talked about the steel. Fiber.
Oh, the rebar?
Yeah. Can you tell if the audience is interested in more about that?
Oh, about that particular product? Okay. First of all, I need to, only if you'll sign a contract that you'll pay based on, if I deliver the value to you, will you pay for it?
If I can afford it.
Okay. Yeah, crowdfunding. Well, crowdfunding, that's an interesting, crowdfunding that brings up a whole new idea here. How many do have a startup company or working with startup companies trying to raise money? Quite a few. How many are you doing crowdfunding? Tried it. It works there too. There's a lot of new laws that are allowing us to do things differently with crowdfunding. In fact, I'm involved with, well, I'm probably, I think the session after this is, anybody going to hear Patrick Donahue?
Technical rules for financing money?
Yep. Patrick Donahue, right?
Yeah, Patrick Donahue.
If you're going to hear that session, I won't leave the room, because he'll be talking more about this. But Pat and I are involved with a new fund here in the Twin Cities called the Hill Capital Fund, and it's allowing us to raise money from the general public, just like a public company that'll pay dividends and everything else just like a stock would, and use that money to invest in this particular fund will be for early stage growth companies. So it won't be for seed capital, but once you prove that there's a market for your technology, that's what we're going to be looking to invest in. But that we couldn't have done that a few years ago because of the law changes. Another thing that's happened is, and I'm not going to get into all the law changes detail because I'm not a lawyer, but and then I could be held liable. But there's other ones that have occurred too that allowed you to raise money crowdfunding wise. In fact, you got any of you in here familiar with a company in Minneapolis called Galt.io? Most successful crowdfunding project, well, in the United States actually, when it happened. A year ago, we created this company called Galt.io, and the whole purpose of Galt.io was to create a online political game that will allow people to create causes and activities and things based on real-world politics to potentially affect how politicians vote. So we could try to get the word out to politicians on things we really believed in. And we figured that the only way we could get people to play that game is to make it a game. Why would anybody get on our network anyway? So we enlisted the help of a couple talk show hosts, radio talk show hosts, that were adamant about trying to change politics. Got them to talk about it on their radio stations. We created our own crowdfunding site. Our objective was to raise $250,000. We did that in the first 28 hours. We raised over $700,000 in a month, which allowed us to build what we've been talking about. Today, that site is up and running, and with the new laws, that crowdfunding aspect of what we built is actually embedded into the site, so we can now use that to raise money for the politicians that are using our site to find out what their constituency wants. And if they like it, they can now give money through our site. So we've become like a, not only for raising money for the crowdfunding sites, but what do they call it? I can't think what a PAC. We've become a super PAC. So we can actually raise money for causes we believe in within our own organization that we can now disperse based on how the people inside the game are voting. And we made the game much like like the Wall Street, or like the Wall Street model. You gain points in your cause by selling stock in that cause, and you have to use Galt coins to do that. Now, I don't know, anybody, are you guys familiar with Atlas Shrugged? Ayn Rand? So Galt came from that, and that's why the name Galt.io is that we figured that there's enough libertarians out there that would play this game when we first started it that would invest in it, and it worked. And I think the thing that's even more interesting about it today is that we have more time per page and more views per page and more time on a page than Google, Facebook, and Twitter combined. So our numbers are just through the roof because you get somebody into, the two key things, politics and religion, right? We couldn't figure it, and we figured God would get mad at us if we built a religious site, but the politician site works. So the whole point of that is when you're going to sell something new, try to find somebody that may be in that market that can be an advocate or an evangelist for you. That's what we did with the radio talk show hosts. So Anyway, I started talking over the question period, so yeah. I guess it depends on what you're trying to sell. You know, in the case of Zappos, it had nothing to do with love, right? I suppose they could have said, we love your feet, but I don't know if that would have gotten as far as we want happy customers. So, I mean, it really has to be based on what you're trying to achieve in the marketplace and what that emotional connection is that's going to allow somebody to connect to your technology or to your service or to your product. It's not just picking out something that's emotional because it's emotional. It has to have some story wrapped around it. In the case of accelerated innovation, we wrap the story around the love. We wrap the story about loving our families because we want them to have a nice environment. So it's got to tie in at least a little bit, or should. Any other questions, comments?
It's about modeling.
Pardon me?
That's about modeling. So
It's about modeling.
What's working and
Yep.
just telling people you're just an aggregate of information, sharing it in a way that
Absolutely.
makes sense.
It totally is, and it's like, I can't stress enough with the people that are starting new businesses, don't overthink it. Try to find some little hook that makes you stand out or differentiate yourself from other people that are already in that business, or if they aren't in that business and this is something new that'll make you stand out to create value of why you're doing this to the marketplace. And don't go after everybody. You can't sell to everybody because not everybody's going to believe in what you're doing. So if you walk up to somebody and you say, you know, I'm rich, and we're igniting an inspired journey. I don't know. It might be as why, right? So I'm igniting an inspired journey. And if they go, oh, cool, and and don't respond like, how do you do that? Don't waste your time, because you're probably not going to convince them of what you want to do anyway. But if that little saying, that little why statement ignites something in them that they say, tell me more. That your elevator pitch will allow you to find those early adopters very quickly. And that's where you got to spend your time and your money, is on those people that gravitate to what you're doing and saying very quickly. Otherwise, it's just a waste of your time, waste of their time, and a waste of your money. I was fortunate enough, some of you guys already heard this story, but I was fortunate enough to work at Apple in the early days. So I was there from 81 to 85. Part of my assignment was to figure out where Apple was going to be in the year 2000. But the one thing that we found, and I'm not going to go through the whole story again, but one thing we found is that there was a commonality between all innovation from the year 1900 to 1980, because we studied all that in order to figure out where we wanted to be in the year 2000. And the commonality is find that early adopter or that innovator that's willing to accept change. They don't have to be another inventor. They don't have to be another entrepreneur. They only have to be somebody that's willing to accept change quite readily. And if you can then show them the value of what your product has for them or your service, they will give you input. They might not, they might not buy right away, but at least they'll talk to you about it, and you can learn more. And then eventually, they'll buy from you, if it really does have the value that they perceive it has. And then they'll become your evangelist to help you sell to other people. Apple never spent any money advertising in its early years, because they knew that, well, exception, 1984 Super Bowl, one time. And the only reason that ad even ran is because Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak paid for it themselves because the board refused to let them do it. That's a whole other story. But they wanted to put that message out there that they were changing the world, that they were willing to pay and use their own money. The next time Apple did any advertising, 1996, after Jobs had been fired and brought back. Anybody know what the advertising was about in 1996? Think differently. There was a series of ads about think differently. Well, our why statement, as I call it, back in the early 1980s, was change the status quo and get people to think differently. That's the only reason we were in business. So when Jobs came back in 1996, he wasn't trying to sell products with think differently. He was announcing to the world, I'm back. Think differently. We're thinking differently again. We're not going through that doing sameness business as we were under Scully. We're thinking differently. We're going back to the old mantra. But other than that, Apple doesn't spend a whole lot of money. They're doing a little bit more now. But I mean, in those days, was all creating a culture of finding innovative people and idea changers that were willing to jump on board. And that, and, you know, it's amazing how that culture has worked in my mind, because part of the project when we were trying to figure out what was going to happen by the year 2000 is that we created a video in it was the latter part of 1983 called, we called it the Mobile Mac, because the Mac was the big thing then. The Apple II was making all the money, so we could put all this other money into the next great thing, which was the Mac. So we had to call it the Mobile Mac. But we made this video that depicted life of a couple police officers on the street in the year 2000 chasing bad guys, but they had a mobile device strapped to their waist that they could pick up and take off, pick up and take off. That was their communicator. Video, audio, phone. So the envision of what was now the iPhone was part of that whole process. I think the only reason it didn't happen, and we had anticipated that that would come out in like 1997, 98 time frame. I think the only reason it didn't is Jobs got fired, and Scully tried to come out with something without understanding the emotional part of it called the Newton, which was a total failure. So when Jobs came back, that was the first thing he resurrected. So it took until 2007 for the iPhone to come out. But even today, you know, iPhone 6 comes out, what happens? People stand in line to buy the damn thing. Does it really do that much different than the iPhone 5 or the 4? Not really. But it's that culture of God having the new thing. They've created this enigma out there that Apple's things will always give you more. I hope the watch doesn't fail them, because I don't know what that's going to do for people, because it really doesn't have a whole lot more capability. But I think this is my opinion, and so, you know, it's not worth a whole lot in the world of Apple anymore. But I think the watch is a me too, and it makes me afraid that the current management team is starting to acquiesce to Wall Street instead of being Apple as Apple should be. But that's a personal opinion, because until they can show me that, huh? Well, I'm not hearing the why anymore, and I'm not seeing why. Is there anybody in this room that can tell me why that watch would be worth buying?
Well, so I've heard a while back here at Apple broadcasting, and I've heard it helps you connect with people more often because you're spending less time with your devices and notifications. So it takes like a couple seconds right after a finish. That's what I've heard Apple have on. I also think, though, it amplifies the fact that we're going to everything wireless at some point, and that the watch is really that next step to where you don't have this device necessarily, and you just have something that's with you all the time, and it's not your phone. It's a handset.
Yeah, I mean, wearables, yeah. You know, I'm usually very optimistic on all that kind of new technology. This is one I'm still not sold on yet. I mean, I think there's places for wearables. I mean, there's a company here in Minneapolis that just got a bunch of money from Google because they've got a wearable band that as you, I'm trying to remember exactly how the, huh? Yeah. You know more about what the, yeah. Yep. So if you have wearables that allow you to do those kinds of things, I think there's value there. I still haven't seen that in the watch. Most of what the Apple Watch is today, in my opinion, is the Rolex of a wearable watch. You know, they're going after the high-end market person, and again, don't get me started on that. This is not what this session is supposed to be about. But no, but I think what happened is the current management team is starting to fall into doing sameness by acquiescing to Wall Street. They're more concerned of making the stock move by making additional revenues than they are in creating purpose of what the products are supposed to happen for.
So at the same time, I believe if they don't have that system available out already in the market and everyone's already adopting to it, then they can't buy out a company like that and then add that to it. I think that's really what it's more about the future as opposed to it being the watch that you want right now.
Could be. Could be. It's going to be an interesting company to watch, I think. I'm keeping my stock. I still believe in them, but I don't get it. Yeah. Of course. I mean, a company can have more than one message. A product shouldn't have more than one message, or a specific type of service shouldn't have any more. Again, in my opinion. A company like General Mills is going to have lots of messages. They're going to have a message for cereal. They're going to have a different message for snacks. They're going to have a different message for Green Giant. And they do. I mean, they run those organizations totally as separate business units, including each have their own president, their own chief marketing officer, their own CFO, their own blah, blah, blah. And every one of them has a different message. Case in point, we worked with General Mills Snack Food Division a couple years ago. And the snack food division was called Snacks Unlimited. And we got them to change the name of that division to Better For You Eating. Now you tell me, what's the connotation of that, even to your downline inside your organization? But if they were going to, and the reason they had to do that is they started losing shelf space in the big box stores like Sam's and Costco. If you don't have shelf space, you're not going to sell as much product. Think about this. Nature Valley granola bar is a $200 million piece of business for Costco. Cliff Bars were about a $20 million piece of business for Costco. Cliff Bars were getting more shelf space because they were trending up. Nature Valley granola bars were trending down, so they were getting less shelf space. At least General Mills was smart enough to realize we got to think about this. So that's why they started moving to that better for you snacking or better for you eating. But they not only came up with changing their why statement, but how they then did that was totally new too. I mean, they literally went to Costco and said, we made a mistake. We forgot to listen to the market. We've been so good at selling our product. We invented granola bars. People are still eating them. We forgot to listen to the market, but stay with us. We're changing. We're going to take the red dye 40 out of it. We're going to take the high fructose corn syrup out of it. We're going to start looking at how we can do great tasting recipes with our products without changing that great taste, but getting them to be a better product for people. And they went to the schools using they went over into the cereal division, who has a very close niche with schools because of the Box Tops program. And they went into the schools and they started teaching kids, eat all the granola bars you want, as long as they're not all Nature Valley granola bars. Because ours aren't that good for you. Some of the other ones are. Now, tell me, is that salesmanship? Well, if you admit you're wrong, how good a trust factor do you have with those kids? Because they've come back now and said, now we have better for you food. And those kids are going, I'll eat it. And they're telling that to their mothers. So, you got to think about the whole. We had a slide earlier today in my other presentation that said the whole is more important than the parts. And think about the whole picture. So sometimes when you admit you're wrong, you're going to gain a better trust for the future. Now, that only happens when you have a big company like General Mills that has money to back it up. But, a startup company, that's going to be a little bit harder to do. But to your point, the message can be different. Other questions? Time's up. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. And I know you would have enjoyed Chris more. He's much more animated and would have loved he would have loved to have been here to do this presentation. So on his behalf, I'm going to say thank you to all of you guys. Thank you.